Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, December 7th. You know what that means. 2016. It is Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Not Pearl Harbor Day, just Pearl Harbor Day anymore. Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Because, of course, well, in case you forgot what to do on Pearl Harbor Day, it's not do another Pearl Harbor. It's remember the one that happened the first time. Just to be clear, there's a lot of domestic terrorists out there, and I just want everyone to be straight about this thing. Let's see, plenty to touch on this morning, as usual. Donald Trump, nearly president, of course, and he likes to touch on anything he can, so why not? We'll take a sampling of the news headlines from around the country today. I'm not 100% clear on the morning schedule here. I never am, really, but I got a note from Greg. Remember, we were down to just Monday and Wednesday with him, and I have a note here that says there's a big traffic accident, and he'll have to head out to work early today, and I guess that means he's left a raft of stories behind for us, as he usually does. So we'll cling to that raft. Easy enough to do. So I think that means that he has to take off early enough that he won't be able to be with us at all, but if he surprises us with a few minutes before leaving, that would, well, it's always welcome. Terrific. I'm not sure whether we can count on that or not, but we certainly have all the stories. Of course, it's also Wednesday, and I'm guessing that unless there's an extraordinarily generous vacation package going on at the Daily Coast World headquarters that I don't know about, that Joan McCarter will be back from vacation and back to visit with us. Always nice to have her around and help us get through a middle of the week show. Always kind of tough to do. You know, Mondays, it's tough to drag yourself out of bed, but there's plenty that happened over the weekend. By Wednesday, we're starting to run low on energy, and it actually helps me make it through the week to know that we can have Joan chime in. And then, of course, end of the week on Friday, Josie Duffy Rice helps us get through the day. I really need to basically be scheduling more of the contributing editors and regular guests. Really don't have to be contributing editors necessarily. It is Daily Coast Radio, but you know, we'd like to cast a wide net and have more people join us and help me through each of the days. We have our morning tweet, which always helps us get through the first couple of minutes. Even when I forget to read it aloud, it gives you a boost. Bill, thanks again for chiming in from Portland, Maine. Daily Coast Radio is live. That's what all this noise in your ear means. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, says we're getting a new Air Force One if he has to build the damn thing himself. Oh, me? Oh, I thought Donald Trump was going to build it himself. I actually managed to mostly avoid the Air Force One story. And I don't think I even got a clear view of what it was. I just saw lots of people shouting about the latest thing that Donald Trump was angry about. And then I got an inkling by about, I don't know, mid-afternoon. Okay, well, it's about Air Force One, but I'm not really 100% sure what exactly it is that's at issue. And I'm still not 100% clear on it, and this is one that doesn't matter a great deal to me, except, once again, it raises all kinds of questions about his entanglements and conflicts of interest and varying reasons for why he would even start such a fight. And the guy can't steer clear of trouble no matter what. I don't know what's wrong with him. Maybe he's unfit for the presidency. It could be that. I guess word is that, somewhere along the line he got a fake notion in his head about cost overruns projected. Well, they weren't projected. That's the problem. He didn't have the cost, right? He didn't have the cost overrun, right? He didn't have the details of the thing right. He I don't know. So he got in his head that there was a $4 billion cost overrun or something like that going on with a new Air Force One being designed and built by the Boeing Corporation. And I don't know. So he tweeted out, oh, it's going to cost $4 billion. That's way too much. Cancel the order. I don't know whether that's something that can be canceled. I don't know. It certainly doesn't work by tweeting it, but presumably there's a more complex procedure behind making any kind of change in something like that. But apparently the contract is relatively new, and the thing's still in the design change phase, and there's been no opportunity for costs to overrun. Certainly not by $4 billion. They're just picking numbers out of hats, saying they want to cancel orders. I did see, I think John Wunderlich from the Sunlight Foundation suggested the other day, it would be interesting to see if he tries to turn this into, we don't need to waste all this money on building a new Air Force One. We can just upgrade my personal jet and put all the fabulous electronics and wonderful appointments into my my own plane, and I'll fly that around. And it'll be so much cheaper for America. Which, of course, then he walks away with the plane, but whatever. Okay, I guess other things in the news today. I'll read a little bit about. I'll catch up a little bit on the Boeing thing. There's a more interesting angle on it. Joan wrote about it, so we can maybe leave that to go over with her when she arrives here. But yeah, I guess he's got a bone to pick with the Boeing companies too. So that's always fun. I understand. I caught wind of the last minute or two before coming on the air that Time magazine, I guess this should have been expected, right? To name, or did name, who's it? Donald Trump. That's the guy. We elected him president. Man of the year. I don't know what to tell you about that. I don't think anybody has been happy with the Time Man of the Year since ever. Maybe since the year it was you. You're the man of the year, the person of the year. Oh, yeah, so it's person of the year these days. They don't say man of the year anymore. That's foolish. And, of course, everybody pointing out, there have been some terrible man/people of the year, like Hitler or Stalin. And, okay, well, if we, if it comes to that, then good for you, Time. You've got a good eye. You never miss on these things. That's an interesting observation. Online, Twitter pal Great Dog, tweeting Trump elected with the biggest popular vote loss since 1876. I never knew. All right. Let's see. What else have we here? Sponson has some notes about the Boeing thing. There is no contract. And the most recent estimate of the future cost of the two planes, by the way, yes, is under $3 billion. So, all right. I don't know that he necessarily said one plane, $4 billion. That was me making the mistake, forgetting that, you usually buy two of those things. Two planes for $3 billion, not $4, but I guess to him an extra $1 billion is pocket change. There's nothing going on. He's just grousing about something. I think New York Times did a little survey of matching his tweets and I guess the time at which they are they're sent and the content. Donald Trump's tweets basically tend to reveal the pattern that whatever he's screaming about at any given time is is likely whatever media has been laid before him at the moment. If he's watching television, that's what he's tweeting about. If he's reading a newspaper, that's what he's tweeting about. All right. Well, quite true. It seems to be the case, and I don't think it took a newspaper investigation, but these days you got to be careful about fake news. So they did everything they could to make the news look real on that score. Here is an observation, by the way, about Air Force One. Meredith, tweeting under the handle of mramsey153. Hi, Meredith. Says, Air Force One is a military plane, not an ordinary passenger plane. That's true. It takes an average of 10 years to design and build. That's a lot. But, this is a unique plane, by the way. Also, Boeing is the only U.S. manufacturer left. Yes, I did see, I think a Ukrainian manufacturer tweeting this morning, like, maybe you want to consider one of our planes for Air Force One. Wouldn't that be something? I don't put that past him, by the way, for him to get angry at Boeing and then say, I'll buy one of Putin's planes. And, yeah, okay, Russia will build the new Air Force One. That'll be great. And that's not just a point of pride, by the way. As Meredith was pointing out, one, it's a military plane. Probably shouldn't have the Russians building our military planes. But I know it's a different kind of military plane. But it's one that has lots of extra bells and whistles. It's not just luxurious for the president or something. It's not even that luxurious, really. I mean, I think Trump is right in pointing out that his plane is more luxurious than Air Force One. That's true. That's a private passenger jet built for luxury. The Air Force One not only has to be big and has to be nicely appointed, of course, but it has to have all kinds of amazing, ridiculous communications and security equipment, by which security, everything from electronic countermeasures to to be able to ward off attack, like missile attack, and scramble the brains of smart weapons being fired at the plane. I don't know if it has weaponry necessarily, but I wouldn't be terribly surprised if there was some sort of onboard capability. But of course, it's hardened against all sorts of attacks, and has to be, protected against electromagnetic pulse attack to the extent practicable, and has to have secure communications links from wherever you are in the world that can't be interrupted. And imagine that, by the way. I mean, he used to be able to make classified phone calls and keep them secure and scrambled and unbreakable from the plane. Sure, why don't we have the Russians build that too? That'll work just great. I mean, so far, to be fair, Donald Trump has not ordered a new Air Force One from his former Soviet manufacturer. I'm just saying, might think about it at some point. Anyway, okay. Let's see. Look at this. How come this name keeps coming up again, too? I just happened to see a tweet go by from Maggie Haberman. Attendee at Trump-Pence inaugural fundraiser at Cipriani. Why does that restaurant keep coming up? Says Trump reveals Mark Burnett came to visit him yesterday. That just after the tweet from Jason Sparks, which I'll retweet for you to take a look at. I guess the photo shoot for the Time Person of the Year cover. And it's a shot of the photo shoot, so you get a sense of, one, the strange pose that they put him in his ridiculous gold room. But you see also all the lighting and equipment and photographers milling about. Jason adding the comment, now give me your I'm about to tweet something crazy look. Perfect. All right, what is Matt Damon's character in The Martian say? Coquettish ingenue. Something like that. All right. Let's scroll ahead here. Oh, a couple more comments. Maureen. Good morning, Maureen. Secret Service has more authority on planes, limo, and Marine One, the helicopter, due to security for the President of the United States. I'm fine with them waiving that at the moment. But, I don't want to set any bad precedent or anything. Yeah, so I can imagine that there's an awful lot of planning that goes into it. And of course, you would be building it with the latest technology. I mean, like stuff that wouldn't, I assume, necessarily be available anywhere else on the market, even for other military aircraft at that point, perhaps. So it sounds like it's probably an expensive job. But just like most things, Trump probably just doesn't understand how, hardly anybody understands how government works and how government procurement works. And, so he thinks he's going to shake it up. And maybe he will. And maybe he gets a crappy Air Force One and, whatever, falls out of the sky. I don't know. Could happen. All right. Well, there's real news. We don't need to speculate on the rest of this stuff. By the way, yesterday I finally did publish. Daily Kos was, really, I feel like we had left them out of the excitement of publishing the discussion piece, if you will, on the January 3rd high noon option for installing a nominee of President Obama's choice on the Supreme Court of the United States. And I think that's probably the right way to regard the piece as a discussion piece. I put it out there. I'm aware that there's a lot of objections to it. I'm not just from Republicans and conservatives who think it's ludicrous, but even, some Democrats who just say, yeah, this is the kind of, there still are a few people who say this is the sort of thing that, yes, I believe that Republicans would try to pull, but we ought not to engage in such things. You're very nice people. I appreciate that. But there are many more people, of course, who say, yeah, because the Republicans would do it in a heartbeat, we ought to do it. Even I'm a little torn by it. I mean, I wrote the thing, and I still think, well, first of all, I'm pretty sure there's zero interest in doing it inside the Senate. They really just don't, in general, like it very much when non-senators propose inside baseball stuff like this and tell them, here's how you can change the rules or manipulate the rules. And this one didn't necessarily require a change in the rules, but it's certainly, outside the norm, which makes them upset and angry. And they're just sensitive about having things like that suggested to them. And even if it works, I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me like, despite the fact that they're going to try and put up a fight on Trump's nominees for various cabinet positions, maybe all of them, and might even be saying that they'll put up a fight on any and maybe all Trump nominees for the Supreme Court. In large part, I think there's not much appetite in among the Senate Democrats for doing anything that's going to get them yelled at. Basically, that you're out of, you're going way outside the box. They think enough norms are going to be disrupted and destroyed by the Trump side of this equation. They don't want to add to the total. And, I disagree, but I do so, I don't know, with a healthy respect, I guess, for my own sanity, I'll say, as opposed to a healthy respect for their positions. But you'll drive yourself crazy trying to tell senators what to do with themselves in the Senate. There's a personal element to the job, and the truth is, as much as we might come to understand about how the place works, we're not in that game. And it is true that sometimes a lot of the senators are far more timid about hard-nosed, hardball politics than they have to be. It's not that they don't have a capacity for it. It's just that they have to believe in it, from in their hearts. And that usually means I'll be hard-nosed and play hardball when it comes to me getting back here and getting to stay here, but not so much necessarily for anybody else. That's just sort of the nature of the political beast. Anyway, so that's where we stand. At least I published it for you to have a look at Daily Kos. And, as expected, even our comments are liberally sprinkled with, this will never work, / they'll never do this, but I wish they would. And over on the conservative side, that one guy from yesterday is enjoying himself immensely, having people tweet, as you like to do when it's clickbait, that so-and-so, I forget the guy's name, it was just that his name was Sean something from the Federalist. And so he's enjoying having people tweet, Sean absolutely destroys, eviscerates, and guts and gores Daily Kos idiot who wrote about this stupid fantasy thing. It's fantasy in terms of will anybody do it? I don't think anybody really had any expectations to the contrary. And that doesn't, of course, address the issue, which is, can this be done? And by not trying it, you don't answer the question one way or another. But I'm pretty sure that when it comes right down to it, there's not much counter for, brute force and a majority and a willingness to use it can do almost anything. Is it a good idea long term? Different question. Is it fair? Different question. Do they have the guts? Different question. Can it work? Not much question to that. Because very often it involves a willingness to say, yeah, I know that's the rule, but not today. And we'll talk a little bit about that issue a little later on, too, because I understand David Dayen, who is frequently cited here on the program for his fantastic coverage of the mortgage fraud crisis, also happened to take a look yesterday at Republican machinations to try to engineer an approval for General Mattis to become Secretary of Defense. That kind of flickered across our screen the other day, but the situation is current law forbids anyone really recently, less than 7 years, separated from active duty in the armed forces from serving as Secretary of Defense. I assume that the root of this has to do with we kind of like the idea of civilian control of the military in this country, but we're throwing that out the window right now. So we look for a 7-year separation there before we can consider anybody for Secretary of Defense. Republicans, of course, control both houses of Congress and now the presidency as well, and are looking forward to waiving that prohibition in order to make it possible for Mattis to serve. But they're doing it in some spectacular style. Perhaps, I don't know whether Joan has seen this or not, and we'll take a look at it and analyze it. But David's quick read from last night appears correct. He sent me a PDF of the bill. They crammed it into it looked like into an appropriations bill, actually. I'm not certain that that was the vehicle now that I think about it, but I can open it up and take a look. But more interesting was, it wasn't that they were saying, well, we don't think this law helps, or we don't think it helps to prevent General Mattis anyway. And maybe 7 years is too long, I don't know, but they don't change the rule. They don't simply say, well, okay, 7 years might be too long, let's make it 3. I don't know how many years separated he is, but the number 3 years, comes up in the legislative fix that they offer. The curious thing about the legislative fix that they offer, besides it being wedged into a must-pass appropriations bill, if I recall correctly, but being wedged into anything at all doesn't make a great deal of sense. Well, it makes sense in that they get to hide it from plain view. But anyway, the fix they came up with, it literally says basically, okay, notwithstanding the provision of law that makes it, I guess, technically illegal, but it makes it out of bounds, out of order, to consider the nomination for Secretary of Defense of someone who has been separated from active duty for less than 7 years. We say the following, that someone who has been separated for more than 3 years but less than 7 years can, in fact, be considered for this position if, and only if, it is the first such person nominated for the position of Secretary of Defense. In other words, if this first nominee, Mattis, has been separated for more than 3 years and less than 7, it's okay to consider him. But if another president were to nominate someone who had been separated from the armed forces for longer than Mattis, but still less than 7 years, no. Still against the law to consider their nomination, because after all, this applies only to the first such person nominated. So that's not dictatorial at all. Doesn't worry anybody, right? That the Republicans would write a waiver into the law that basically says this provision will not count against people that Donald Trump nominates as Secretary of Defense. but anybody else, you're out of luck. We're back to the old rule. Although David did point out, well, you never know. It's entirely possible. He's a fickle guy. He might nominate somebody else, and the first person to be nominated under those conditions might well be, several presidents down the road. He's just kidding, and of course, he ends up referring to the fictional president and Secretary of Defense, I think in Dr. Strangelove, that he was referring to. But it was pretty amazing to read. In the end, it's not even really all that worrisome because, of course, they could just do it anyway, for one thing. And the mechanism that they design isn't something that automatically shoos Mattis through. It just expedites the process and saves a lot of floor time maneuvering through the operations that they would force through by brute force and majority vote later on. Anyway, I might as well just you might as well make them do it and do it in plain view, and so far as C-SPAN 2 can be considered plain view. But, I don't see why you have to do them any favors. I just thought that was kind of a weird thing, and maybe we'll pick that up and talk about it later on. Let's see. Oh, here's a note, by the way. Justice has sent along United Tech. Remember them? We were talking about them the other day. They own Carrier. You remember them, of course. They also own, well, because they're United and they do a lot of tech. What other company are they united with? Pratt Whitney Engines, which makes engines for Airbus, which is a foreign company competing with Boeing. That is interesting. Okay. So, gee whiz. And now, I think that Trump is still not a shareholder. I think he owns some of the bonds, actually, for United Tech. It wasn't a great deal of money by his standards, but someone did point out the other day, he's got investments in United Technology and therefore Carrier, and therefore this would be another one of those dumb things that you're not supposed to be allowed to do, but who cares because Trump. And I think it would be an accurate read at this point to say that Trump supporters view his ability to profit personally from his service as president is a feature and not a bug. They claim to actually want that to happen and to enjoy the fact that it's happening, largely because it, I think, pisses off everybody else. That may really be all there is. All right. Here's a interesting looking headline designed to distract me from everything else and have a look at it. That's an interesting thing too. We'll pass this out. You just watch the Twitter feed. Although, again, if you're listening by podcast, you won't be able to see it. So I'm just observing Spencer Ackerman's tweet. Time bends the knee, that referring to the Person of the Year cover, and it really, in particular, makes the comparison to previous Time covers, which featured the Donald Trump face melting down. Isn't that interesting to have him do meltdown and then finish up the year as Person of the Year? Well, it was rather remarkable. Sort of fishy, though, of course, given that everybody's saying, boy, it's an awfully weird thing that 95% chance of Hillary Clinton winning, and then all sorts of allegations of weird things happening at the polls and interference from outside the country, and well, he's Person of the Year. Oh well, okay. Well, that is an odd trajectory. The headline that grabbed my eye, once again, The Hill doing a fabulous job flooding my timeline with attractive pictures and clickbait headlines. So, taking some hints from that. I should need to have some sort of social media policy powwow with Daily Kos and figure out how we can make it that I'm retweeting their stories and their fabulous pictures more often than The Hill without my having to go out of my way. That's essentially the issue for me. Anyway, The Hill has grabbed me with this one. Colorado electors sue state in effort to block Trump. Let's take a look. And how come people from the Federalists aren't going to scream at this person for 20 minutes or however long he's going to spend on it? I don't know. He's not. It's no fun to say the Hill is stupid. It's sport over there to say Daily Kos. See, they don't know what they're talking about. We only changed the filibuster rules last time. Anyway, Jesse Hellman has written this piece on Colorado. Might as well catch up on the thinking. Anyway, 2 Democratic electors from Colorado filed a federal lawsuit Tuesday challenging a state law that requires they vote for the winner of the state's popular vote. The Denver Post reports. Why exactly? Polly Baca and Robert Nemanich had pledged to support Democrat Hillary Clinton, the winner of Colorado's 9 electoral votes, but now they are joining so-called moral electors in other states and say they'll shift their Democratic votes to a consensus Republican pick if one emerges. I see. Okay. Yeah, you know what? One of the interesting things I saw when people were first sort of postulating, oh, you know, the Electoral College can do something about this, which was the minute after everybody realized that Donald Trump would likely end up the president if they didn't do that, I saw posts and blog posts and Twitter missives and Facebook posts from electors from various states saying, hey, does anybody know like how we can get in touch with the other electors from the other states? This is a really interesting thing. There's never been any need, I don't think, but there's no mechanism through which electors in the several states can confer with one another. There's never been a need for them to do that. But I mean, if we're going to take the institution seriously and say that we're going to keep it and that it's real and they really do have the ability to choose either as between the candidates or somebody else entirely, and it appears that flexibility does exist despite the fact that it's baffling because of the way practice has gone for the past 200 plus years. Then we really ought to think about having some sort of permanent infrastructure in place whereby the electors from each of the states can reach the electors from the other states. Because, think about that. They're rather short on time. And thinking about coming up with a consensus Republican candidate to replace Donald Trump and ask Democratic electors to go along with it in order to make the operation actually work, they're going to have to do some serious consulting with one another and find a way to get together and talk, and probably do so in a secure location somewhere where they can be open and honest and not fear any leaks about what they're talking about. And there is no such infrastructure. Everybody just meets in their own states and they know what they're going to do, and the outcome is, the conclusion is foregone, and there's no need to consult on anything. And so, in the current state of things, electors, all members of an electoral college, they know perhaps they definitely know who the other electors in their state are. And it's not a secret. I mean, if you search the internet, you can probably find out who those people are, and then you can try to find ways to contact them. But it's kind of bizarre that the electoral college, they don't talk to one another. I think that's kind of weird. Anyway, so I guess we're facing that problem here. These 2 electors in Colorado say they're interested in talking about a deal with others, and where are they stuck, or have they found out how to contact other electors? I don't know. The moral electors, I guess since they're hanging together under that moniker, must have had some contact with one another. They want to persuade Republican electors in other states to vote for a third-party candidate, the Post reports, in an attempt to keep Donald Trump from receiving 270 electoral votes. Hooray. Several states, including Colorado, prohibit electors from voting against the candidate who won the state's electoral votes, And Colorado Secretary of State Wayne Williams has already threatened to replace Baca and Nemanich if they try. Instead of honoring the will of the Coloradans who voted for them, these two faithless electors seek to conspire with electors from other states to elect a president who did not receive a single vote in November, Williams said in a statement. We don't know that. The members of the Electoral College are slated to meet on December 19th, that's coming up soon, to cast their official votes for president. Trump clinched 306 electoral votes now, it's reported, on November 8th. It presents an interesting conundrum, of course, and a lot of people are grabbed by the anti-democratic bent of it. But, I mean, guess what? We've had the Electoral College. It's been on the books for quite a while. And, yeah, that's pretty much the way it is. They can do that. And then there's the question of even states that purport by state statute to prohibit their electors from voting for anyone other than their popular vote winner in their state. We don't know whether that stands up to a court challenge or not. We don't know whether a court would take it. We don't know how a court would treat it. But, you know, if it's a question, then you should just be getting rid of the Electoral College and or changing the rules at the federal level for it. Okay. It seems, you know, that it's out there. We should be aware of the alternatives and be aware of the fact that there are electors who are in this weird and unique position, and that they have to give some thought to the very basis of how we do these things from time to time. But I assume we'll just keep careening from crisis to crisis on the Electoral College, probably forever. It really worries people for some reason to monkey with these things, just as it worries people to monkey with the high noon option for a relatively small scale goal at this point. I mean, you're talking about changing who's going to be the president. I'm just talking about one more justice on the Supreme Court. And while it's a big deal, it's not the same thing as just switching directions and picking somebody else for president. I don't know why that doesn't it doesn't seem to count for anything for some reason. Okay. Let's see. I might as well take a good look here at the stories that Greg left for us so we can take a walk through a more organized train of thought. Why not? Let's see. What has he given us here? He's given me an excerpt of something from the Shorenstein Center.org, by the way, in case you were wondering. The Harvard Kennedy School's Shorenstein Center, that is. How interesting to attach even more names to this. The Shorenstein Center, of course, established for the purpose of studying media, politics, and public policy. Of course. I know this because it says so right here on the website. News coverage of the 2016 general election, their current topic. How the press failed the voters. And it's a lengthy piece, and there's charts. So we'll, of course, include a link to it in our daily roundup. But Greg has done me the favor of excerpting the piece that he would have himself concentrated on had there not been a giant traffic accident on the way to work. The real bias, this piece says, of the press is not that it's liberal. Well, that's good to know. Its bias is a decided preference for the negative. As scholar Michael Robinson noted, the news media seemed to have taken some motherly advice and turned it upside down. If you don't have anything bad to say about someone, don't say anything at all. Ha ha ha. Well, to what extent is that actually true, besides being clever? A New York Times columnist recently asserted that the internet is distorting our collective grasp of the truth. Yes, it is. I'm wary of just simply letting that lie, though, of course, because for a long time, the online community, what became the netroots here on the left, anyway, was very distrustful of the credentialist notion that controlled among the traditional mainstream press, right? And saying things like the internet is distorting our collective grasp on the truth at that point, 10 years ago made people say, that sounds like professional media arrogance. Now it's starting to sound a little bit more sensible, isn't it? So, just a curveball to throw ourselves here in Netroots world on Netroots Radio. Maybe they're changing their focus a little bit, or maybe the focus of a statement like that has changed, or maybe we're just waking up to something they saw all along. I don't know. I guess we have to consider that possibility. Although that doesn't rule out the possibility that there's been just an enormous cascading progression in, on a chart, we would have seen a giant spike in the difficulty of grasping the truth thanks to the internet, and I think a change in kind as well as a change in scope and magnitude. Anyway, the excerpt here continues, there's a degree of accuracy in that claim, but the problem goes beyond the internet and the talk shows. The mainstream press highlights what's wrong with politics without also telling us what's right. What is right? I don't know. I could not tell you. It's a version of politics that rewards a particular brand of politics. When everything and everybody is portrayed as deeply flawed, there's no sense making distinctions on that score, which works to the advantage of those who are more deeply flawed. Now I'm catching on. Civility and sound proposals are no longer the stuff of headlines, which instead give voice to those who are skilled in the art of destruction. The car wreck that was the 2016 election had many drivers. Journalists were not alone in the car, but their fingerprints were all over the wheel. Very interesting. And I think that's probably right. Once it gets down to the question of, well, I hate them both, and I don't want to vote on the basis of the lesser of two evils, or however you end up expressing it, right? But once you've thrown out the comparison, I guess once you put forth the comparison that they're both deeply flawed, and that tends to be it. That's the extent of the investigation, as opposed to, is there a third dimension to this? Is one more deeply flawed than the other, or the flaws reach another level? Are they distinguishable in magnitude? I mean, certainly Democratic voters had their finger on this all the way through, right? Sexual assault allegations versus, I really shouldn't have maintained my own email server. But of course, Republicans viewed the whole email server thing as a very different problem, not that it was arrogant or that it was foolish to assume that you would get away with running your own server and being able to do home-brewed security better than the State Department could, although that turned out to be true. But rather, they're, in their view, controlling the flow of information that, legally speaking, was supposed to be not public and reviewable, but part of the ongoing, if classified, record that could be examined by the right authorities at some point, if there were any suspicion that something had gone wrong. That the operation was privatized instead, and that the record the record available to investigators to conduct their witch hunt, essentially about Benghazi, would have been purposefully, or could have been purposefully, sanitized because they were in private hands. I understand that's the allegation. But then, of course, by now, that I think seems to everybody rather ridiculous, considering how frequently that same problem occurs and will be waived in the question of, for instance, shall we confirm all of the cabinet appointees that Donald Trump now thinks ought to sit on his cabinet? We already know that some of those people have that same problem. We already know that he's considering David Petraeus, who apparently had no regard for keeping those issues straight, as Secretary of State. Doesn't seem to bother him all of a sudden. But Trump was never concerned about that as an issue. He was only concerned about banging it as a drum to make people angry at Hillary Clinton. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know here. Anyway, plenty more to review from Greg's roundup, including the actual roundup. Pardon me. I don't know, really sticking in my throat this morning here. But Greg did have the opportunity to put together the morning APR, so we can scroll through that and mine that for some topics as well. And he starts out with the embedded tweets of Parker Malloy, who I guess, well, let's click and open up. I never know. I never recognize anybody's names and who they're working for these days, since that changes all the time. Parker Malloy is a writer at Upworthy. And so we come across a lot of that material from time to time. But let's see, the world to Pat McCrory, former, I guess, our outgoing governor of North Carolina, and a YouTube link, eh? All right, let's go see what that's about. It's the old no, hey, goodbye piece from Steam. Okay, so there you go. Do you want to hear it? I mean, we don't have to play it there, but oh no, that's right. I can't because it's copyrighted material, and if I do that, then when I go to put the podcast up on YouTube, I've been noticing this. If you have any copyrighted music in there, it automatically detects it, and then it won't post right. Isn't that interesting? What a fantastic feature! Yay! Anyway, so there you go. The world says to Pat McCrory, goodbye. And she follows up with the fact that Pat McCrory lost and Trump won in North Carolina is a pretty good case against arguments that identity politics, quote unquote, cost Dems the election. Very interesting. And as a matter of fact, we're then following that up in the APR with Derek Thompson in The Atlantic, who, according to Greg, nails it with his piece, The Dangerous Myth That Hillary Clinton Ignored the Working Class. I did see a lot of discussion about that this morning. To many white Trump voters, this excerpt says, the problem wasn't her economic stance, but the larger vision, a multi-ethnic social democracy that it was a part of. After the election, some people called for an end to identity politics that promotes niche cultural issues over economic policy. But any reasonable working class platform requires the advancement of policies that may disproportionately help non-whites. For example, hundreds of thousands of black men stay out of the labor force after being released from prison sentences for non-violent crimes. For them and their families, criminal justice reform is essential economic reform. But what do we mean, of course, by they stay out of the labor force? Well, in many cases, they're kept out of the labor force. But and so that's the point. For them and their families, criminal justice reform is essential economic reform. I bet Josie has plenty to say on that score. Even if poor whites see it as a distraction from that real issue that and those others that bedevil the working class, like trade policy, the long-term future of the U.S. involves rising diversity, rising inequality, and rising redistribution. The combination of these forces makes for an unstable and unpredictable system. Income stagnation and inequality encourage policies to redistribute wealth from a rich few to the anxious multitudes. But when that multitude includes minorities, who are seen as benefiting disproportionately from those redistribution policies, the white majority can turn resentful. If you do it right, well, white working class might be pissed. That's what we need to understand and deal with. Sometimes you need to adjust. Other times you need to outvote. That's Politics 101, concludes Greg. Let's see. Next up in his roundup, just by way of reviewing, let's see, public policy polling on some observations about the North Carolina governor's race and Moral Monday. Yes, by the way, Now that race is done and he has conceded, it's time to recognize the incredible work that the Moral Monday organizers did in making that happen. In the atmosphere in which they started, and especially in the political atmosphere in which we finished this race, I don't think there were many betting folks who would have said, if I know where we start and you tell me where we end, that North Carolina boots their governor over this stuff. It was a great campaign and everything. Among liberals, it makes a great deal of sense. Progressives, we were like, I'm glad they're pushing back. But is it going to convince the voters of the whole state, North Carolina, to boot this guy? I hope so. But do we bet on it? I don't know that we would have. Especially if you had told us, I'll give you a hint. In the end, believe it or not, Trump wins. Now, tell me what happens in North Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina bucks the trend, goes the other way. I don't think anybody would have guessed that. And the fact that it happened, I'm going to guess. It's not too much to say. Pretty much all credit to the progressive organizers in North Carolina and the aggressive work that they did in Moral Monday and sustaining that pushback. I guess I'm surprised that we didn't see the same result obtain in Wisconsin, but I wonder whether there was I don't know. I mean, different circumstances. Wisconsin was certainly very close. North Carolina also very close. So maybe with the, wind blowing a slightly different direction, it works in Wisconsin. But two states where there was this amazing sustained resistance to Republican, not only Republican takeover, but, overshifting to the right. And, I think we were surprised by the pushback in both places initially. And then the rest of the country just kind of got used to that being the nature of progressive culture in Wisconsin, that they were willing to do such things. And it was good to see someone trying the same thing in North Carolina, but I don't know that I would have bet on its succeeding in North Carolina. It sounds like I'm down on North Carolina, but I guess it's really just a backhanded way of saying I guess I have to acknowledge that some of the most amazing and smart and successful organizing going on in progressive circles, you'd have to point to North Carolina. Of course, I'm sure, there are places that are deep blue seas of progressivism that say, well, what maybe, it's good that they won the governorship, but it's not necessarily the case. It would not be accurate to say that they've elected a progressive government in North Carolina. That's true, but I guess that's good commentary on the national election front too. It's not that they elected the most progressive government any state has ever seen for North Carolina. They didn't. They accepted the best available compromise and marshaled all their forces behind it and said, on the whole, we're better off under the leadership of this Democratic candidate who may not measure up on the progressive scale. But we're just far better off as a starting point here than we would be there under a second term of McCrory. And, we have to be pleased with the results. I think you can see the parallel pretty clearly in the national election context without leaning too hard on anybody. You can pick up on it from there. All right. So here, the next piece in Greg's roundup, James Hohmann from the Washington Post with an example of why you sometimes just have to outvote them. That's the other half of the Politics 101. Policy didn't matter. It starts out here in this excerpt. What we missed was that nobody cared about solutions, said Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I didn't miss that. Who managed Mike Huckabee's campaign until he dropped out and then joined Trump's operation as a consultant soon after. And I guess the revelation here isn't that I missed it, I didn't, you didn't. It's that it took time even for Huckabee people to figure it out. And then once they did, they said, I'll go be a Trump person. So there you are. They just wanted to burn it all down. They didn't care about building it back up. They wanted to burn it to the ground and then figure out what to do with the ashes afterwards. There was no understanding of this electorate and the anger on the front end in terms of just how pissed off they were. You may have the best policy in the world to get every single American the best job they've ever had. Nobody cared. It's interesting because that quote could easily have been put forth by any Democratic operative. I don't know how good I feel about seeing it put forward by a Republican operative who went to work for Trump. Basically, you're saying nobody cares about policy. It doesn't matter whether you're smart. It doesn't matter whether you know how to fix problems. The people were so pissed off. All they really wanted was to have their, to be pumped up and vent their spleens. And I'm going to help do that. Wait a minute. I don't know that that's somebody I, want roaming free in the United States of America, much less running things. That's pretty interesting. Well, okay, what else doesn't matter? Experience. Experience didn't matter. From Marco Rubio campaign manager Terry Sullivan, we got hit with commercial after commercial about how little experience Marco had and how many missed votes in the Senate. It didn't matter. People don't care. The Senate sucks. Why would we want to be there? We're not voting. Who cares? And voters bought into that. Experience was a liability. It was not an asset. We figured that out early, but Trump took it to the next level. It doesn't matter. He got back into the Senate himself. So he's right. Experience doesn't matter. That's why I don't know whether I think I mentioned it in the days immediately following the election. I was having trouble explaining to the kids with conviction that they needed to do their homework and go to school. I don't know what to tell you. You don't become an expert in anything. Be dumb. Don't do your homework. Cheat. You got a 50-50 shot at becoming president anyway. Just forget about it. I really, at this point, I didn't know why to tell kids to stay in school. All right. Same author on North Carolina, interestingly enough, from the Daily 202 roundup in the Washington Post, how bathroom bill backlash cost North Carolina's Republican governor his job. The big idea, the American people punished politicians in both parties this year, both sides, when they perceived them as being too focused on advancing a divisive social agenda at the expense of bread and butter kitchen table issues that they care about. Here, the key was and is maintaining policy opposition while still looking reasonable. Kudos to Reverend Barber on that. Yeah, pretty much that sums it up. I probably should have read that instead of wandering around in the wilderness of my own mind a few minutes ago. All right. Let's see. Just skipping on down. Oh, yes. Here, a tweet from Sahil Kapoor. New. He says, Trump's threats of vengeance taxes on businesses that move jobs away are already making Republicans nervous. Who knew? This in Bloomberg politics. And yeah, I believe Kevin McCarthy already said, I'm not really too into that. That's one of many places where fracture lines are beginning to form up among the members of the Republican conference in the House. And of course, the House Freedom Caucus has its own ideas about how they would like things to run and whether or not they'll mesh with Donald Trump's ideas or Paul Ryan's ideas. We have yet to see. Perhaps something that we can discuss with Joan during her segment. Let's see. Last couple of pieces from the roundup include the case for normal elections under a President Donald Trump. Our default positions for the upcoming elections in 2018 and 2020 should not be that Trump will self-immolate because he's a disorganized mess. This is according to Seth Mascott in the Pacific Standards. One of the big mistakes that many political observers, including me, made this fall was assuming that since this year's presidential nomination cycle was so weird and defied the expectations of so many observers, including me, the general election would be weird too. Well, it was. But quite simply, a Democrat running for a third consecutive term of Democratic control of the White House during a period of moderate economic growth should be at a slight disadvantage. We knew this, but set it aside. We assumed that Donald Trump's bizarre and offensive behavior and his unconventional, unprofessional, underfinanced campaign would change that equation. We were wrong. In the end, Trump has slightly underperformed the economy, but not by much. Partisan voters rallied to their respective camps, and we got pretty much typical presidential election outcome. That's a good point. That's true. I mean, historically, absent the insanity of Donald Trump, I don't know that observers, if you really just gave them generic Republican candidate, generic Democratic candidate, and ask, do the Democrats win a continuation of the Obama administration in the form of generic Democratic candidate? The answer would likely be no. Very true. That it's a pretty typical outcome. And I would say I'm going to leave that out there on the table as usable, but there's a lot more necessary. You know, you're going to have to draw on a lot more other sources. But a usable piece of evidence if you want to drag this out. And we're not going to do it today. I'm just too exhausted for it. But I'll put it out there. Would a Bernie Sanders candidacy have been perceived, a nomination, that is to say, as the Democratic nominee, would it have been seen? Could it have been seen? Could it have been portrayed as merely tacking a third Obama term on to the end of the Obama administration? They would certainly try and do that, although it really would have been interesting because the first inclination, surely, of whoever the Republican nominee would have been, and almost certainly the case had it, had in the alternate reality it been Donald Trump again, had it been a Sanders-Trump election, I was very quick to, I certainly immediately dismissed the notion that somehow he would have campaigned differently against him in terms of the smears and the lies, or, how he would portray him and how they would be, screaming socialist. And, of course, the emergence of the so-called alt-right wouldn't have helped anything either. I mean, they're as misogynist as they were. Obviously, we now see how deep their anti-Semitism runs, and that certainly wouldn't have helped anything. But, it's not determinative of the outcome, obviously, but that's a good argument to be made that the thing you gotta avoid at all costs, perhaps. I mean, who knows when you're predicting things, but looking back, you say, a pretty traditional outcome to seeking a third Democratic term in a row on more or less the same platform, and certainly a similar platforms, is, in absent outrageous economic upheaval or some other mitigating circumstance, like the craziness of Donald Trump. And granted, at the time, that was a pretty good guess about just how crazy he was. You will end up with the opposition capturing the White House. So, I guess you could have put that forward. I don't know that anybody did it in those terms explicitly, but I'm certain that there are a lot of Sanders supporters who feel like that's part and parcel of the argument that they were making. And they may have been, and I may have missed it. That's certainly true. All right, so I think that's an interesting tidbit to take away from it. Also, though, I think important to take out of it is, again, just like we reminded you early on, just how close the election really was, and just how few voters could have turned this into what a huge victory, and it's the most progressive platform ever put forward, supposedly, by the Democratic Party, and it's the first woman, and it's a new day and a new dawn, and everything's fantastic and wonderful, and America is a progressive country, however you might have taken that. versus, 40,000 votes, it turns out now, switch and go the other way. America's a fascist dictatorship, and anti-Semitism is a legitimate philosophy all of a sudden. Instead of getting the most progressive thing ever and the first woman president, it's swastikas spray painted on schools and hijabs being grabbed off of women's heads in the subway in New York City. So we have overreacted a little bit there. And but once again, another showing that maybe the outcome of this election ought not to be interpreted as something more drastic than it really is. But this being the early stages of the game, during which the winning candidate, according to the Electoral College, has the business of pretending that he has a mandate, because that's what presidents do. They're making as extreme a raft of claims as they possibly can. All right, so we'll let Greg sum that bit up here. That was, of course, part of the problem. No, it wasn't because Hillary was so universally awful. We and others expected more Republicans to reject Trump, and they didn't. They voted. Our side voted too, but not always in the places we expected. We are going to go through this analysis exercise not to rile up Sanders supporters or third-party proponents or loyal Democrats, but to make sure we really understand what happened, and not just attribute it to your pet grievance or mine. If you don't fully appreciate the problem and how close this election was, you will not come up with the right solution. And even if you do, you might still get it wrong. It's entirely possible. I'll just add that. Policy may not have mattered for this election. It may not matter by itself for the next one. Gasp. And just having a better policy won't be enough. Or we might be in a different place altogether. We might even miss what we used to have. We shall see. For an example of things we might miss, next excerpt up, Ed Young from the Atlantic. We got Pacific and Atlantic again. How Trump could wage a war on scientific expertise. That, I think, is probably a little bit more self-explanatory than most of the other ones, but I'll leave that one hanging out there for our examination, or your examination, later on. Once again, of course, the roundup will be included in the end of the day podcast roundup of a cavalcade of topics and cornucopia of links. What else? Let's see, just see what else we can hit headline-wise here. David Lauder, LA Times, big Republican states could have a lot to lose from Obamacare repeal. Yeah, okay, definitely want to keep that one on the radar. Josh Marshall noting at TPM, by the way, House Republicans have the D.C. press on board with the idea that they're going to push through repeal and delay in the first few weeks of the Trump administration and Medicare phase out later in the year. But in an interview with the Portland Press Herald, Susan Collins is deeply concerned. She seems like a lukewarm or a no on both. We'll see. Without making hard commitment, Collins told the paper she's not inclined to support plans to privatize Medicare. Collins is troubled, her favorite word, Greg notes, by a lot of things that she eventually votes for on party lines, but any port in a storm. Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up, and just in time, too, Joan McCarter joins us now to take us in a slightly different direction. I hope. Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm fine.
Okay.
Feeling absolutely no pressure whatsoever.
You see, help us. Your only hope. Isn't it? No one calls you that, huh? All right.
Actually, that's my hairdresser told me that last night.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm looking to you for direction. No.
Oh, all right. Well, if she starts calling you Joni Juan Kenobi,
yeah, I'm gonna really freak.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I've ever heard anybody. By the way, I mean, did anybody when you were a kid call you Joni at all? I don't know. Was that? No, I don't. I've never heard anybody refer to you that way. But
my college boyfriend's family did. But only because his mother was named Joan. So
okay.
To a confusion.
Okay. Well, that's different. Yeah. All right. Well, at any rate, you're our only hope. So there you go.
I'll do what I can.
Okay. Well, I know you could probably deliver on some stories of Republicans in disarray.
Yes, indeed. Just wrote one, in fact.
Okay. Let's start a roundup that way then.
I heard you talking before I called in, and
okay.
I didn't hear everything you said on the repeal and delay plan for Obamacare.
Yeah, I haven't really discussed much of it. I think everybody has kind of gotten an inkling for what they're thinking of doing, but I just quickly read a paragraph or two of Josh Marshall saying that looks like the House Republicans, as he puts it, has the D.C. press on board with the idea that they're going to do that, but that's it. I mean, that isn't saying anything. They have the Republicans are telling the press, and the press believes that they are going to use the repeal and delay version, which I think, depending on who you talk to about it, the definition is a little bit different. But as opposed to the old repeal and replace, because they have no replacement and never did.
Right.
But now they've caught the car. What are we going to get?
Right. They still don't know that part because they actually can't agree on the repeal part. Well, actually, the repeal they've agreed on. It's the delay part that they're having a problem with.
Yeah.
Because the House maniacs, the Freedom Caucus, are saying 6 months, 6 months. Ted Cruz is saying 6 months. We have to unravel this whole thing in this first year. And for all of the people who've been around long enough and paid attention to how this stuff works kind of understand that it can't really happen in 6 months. That it's got to be at least 2 years, maybe even 3 years. But if you go 3 years, you're in the next presidential election season. And really, do you want to be continuing the chaos that long? Right now they can't even agree on the delay part.
Okay. So.
And you've got the Freedom Caucus saying, yep, no way we agree to anything longer than 2 years. Absolutely nothing longer than 2 years. And we're going to fight for 6 months.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that one comes out. But yeah, I mean, so that's just interesting they move from a repeal and replace to, okay, we don't have a replacement, but let's repeal it and get that part done and give ourselves X amount of time to come to a decision. I mean, actually,
and they can't even agree on X.
Right. So I'm not certain that it would matter anyway. Whatever they put in at X, when X time rolls around, they'll say, we don't have anything now either.
Right.
And we need Y more time. So I don't know. Maybe it's a smart thing to do in that sense. I guess it's, or at least it's the most realistic of them. Believe it or not, ends up being the Freedom Caucus saying, well, we might as well make it 6 months because we're not going to meet the deadline of 2 years anyway. So you might as well give yourself a chance to fail at 6 months. Then you can fail again at 1 year, 1.5 years. And then, if you're willing to try it at 2 years in the next midterm election cycle, you could try it then. But then you'll just end up saying, no, let's push it another year to make sure that we can, not have to deal with angry constituents. So now we're at 3 years. So I don't know. Maybe in that sense, it might work. Of course, I suspect that they're serious and really think that they'll have a solution in 6 months, and that's, okay. That's a different story.
No, the Freedom Caucus doesn't care if there's a solution.
Oh, that could be. Yeah.
They don't want to. It doesn't matter to them. They just want to blow it up. What happens after they blow it up doesn't really concern them.
They have an odd way of doing it.
They do.
Okay.
Not really a governing kind of way of doing things.
No.
On that side.
But Republicans must show that they can govern. I have read that.
Yeah. Yeah, they have 6 months to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that what we heard back in 2014?
Yes, and that's why they're asking for
do it.
That's why the Freedom Caucus says 6 months now. They're just familiar with that phrase. Just as much as that they have to show that they can govern. Well, okay, I guess they are supposed to show they can govern now that they will have the White House. They can govern
so far as figuring out how to write new laws that allow them to win elections.
Yeah, they're good at that.
That's as much governing as I think we've seen them being capable of doing.
Well, that's their favorite thing to do, certainly.
And at the state level, doing what Ohio just did, putting a bill banning abortion at 6 weeks on the governor's desk.
It's always 6 something.
Yeah.
These guys. Okay. Yeah, I heard about that one, and I expect that. We're reminded.
Of course, you know what this one is, right? This is the Supreme Court challenge that they hope under Trump will undo Roe v. Wade.
I see. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Now that you mentioned it, I'm much clearer on it. Yeah. So it might be important who's on the Supreme Court. I wish someone had said something about that during the election. Too bad. Yeah. Well. So they're going to push the. That's an interesting approach, and it's obviously been in the works for a long time. Somebody has to come up with a law that doesn't outright ban abortion, but that makes it so unreasonable a window that it effectively bans abortion, and take it to a court and see whether they're willing to let a law stand that effectively bans it, and then I guess use that as a building block to say, well, if you're effectively banning it, why don't we just ban it?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder who that 9th or possibly 10th, 11th, and 12th Supreme Court justice will be.
Well, we have to see what Kasich decides to do about it. He is pro-life, as they like to call themselves, pro-forced birth. But is he gonna go that far? I mean, Kasich's has been trying throughout this past year to present himself as the moderate. We'll see.
Yes. It comes at a good time, I guess, for him to audition for being the emergency bailout electoral college candidate. But I don't know. I haven't seen his name mentioned with that. But I don't know who they turn to. But I don't know. I picked up that story early in the morning that a loose network of a few electors in various states talking to one another about what are we going to do, and should we exercise our conscience clauses here and pick a third party candidate or a Republican replacement. And it was just
and yesterday in those many Hill tweets that you were talking about, there was a Hill tweet saying Kasich says, "No, don't vote for me, electors.
Okay,
don't put this on me." So,
that would be that'd be kind of a nightmare to have to be that guy.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, what if you ended up president? Well, that might be a nice bonus. But a good way to guarantee that you're not the guy would be to sign the bill.
Yeah.
So I don't want to encourage you to do that, but a good way to end up president, maybe by accident, would be to say, we're not going to be the ones to send this case to the Supreme Court. But I don't see how he resists that opportunity.
Yeah.
All right. So, that's an interesting stateside version of it. And again, I was reminded this morning of how many state legislatures rest in Republican hands now. A lot of cars have been caught around the country. And so I imagine we'll be seeing, if it's not Ohio, it'll be somebody else. And I don't know whether Kasich takes that to mean the pressure's off and I don't have to be the governor that sends the test case to the court, or I better hurry up and do it or someone else will. I'm not sure where his head is in that, which is why I never thought he was a reasonable Republican, even compared to Donald Trump.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. I wanted to ask you about this. I don't know if you caught this one, but I mentioned earlier that David Dayen had caught and sent to my attention that the Republicans have attached an exception for General Mattis in the continuing resolution. Interesting, of course, that obviously you attach it now to a must-pass bill. I remembered only last night that I had opened it up to see what it was and found that it was the Energy and Water Appropriations bill.
It's the continuing resolution.
Right.
That has to pass by this Friday.
It started life as Energy and Water development, and that's why I had that in my head. And then I realized, wait a minute, no, why would they have energy and water appropriations in December? This must be something else. So I noticed that in his tweet, it's the CR.
It's the CR.
And
that keeps government open.
Yes.
After December 9th, which is, by the way, Friday.
I knew that was coming. December 9th. I was like, one digit in that date. That's got to be soon, right? Because there's...
Yep.
Because,
that's the way numbers here work. I was thinking, and I don't know why I thought, well, okay, we're not going to have a shutdown fight this year because they got everything they wanted in the election. So why would they fight to shut down government? And here we go. Yeah.
So I saw that David covered that the other day. I mean, the headline's as plain as can be. Republicans threatening to shut down government to ram through Trump's defense secretary nomination.
Yep.
And now I see that, well, I mean, he gives you the good breakdown of what's going on here. It's a 70-year-old federal law here that we're talking about, by the way, that prohibits anyone who's been on active duty in the armed forces in the last 7 years from holding a senior defense post, not just Secretary of Defense. But the way the Republicans went about getting that out of the way was interesting. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the wording of the waiver.
Yes.
What do you
for this appointment only?
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Why don't you just say this 70-year-old federal law might not really, fit the bill anymore? And how many years separated from service is Mattis? Is it 4, 3, something like that?
I think it's 2 or 3 is all.
Because the language was seemed to make it like the minimum was 3 years, so maybe it's been 3 for him. But what a weird way of doing things to say 3 is enough, so long as Trump is making the nomination. Right. But even reincarnated Ronald Reagan doesn't get to do it. At least not now. Anyway.
It's sort of in keeping with the idea that. Yeah, a sitting president gets to pick Supreme Court justices unless that sitting president is Barack Obama. So,
I guess that's true.
It's the way their heads work.
It does. It takes on a special significance for in my mind here that just because there's been so much discussion of, geez, it's weird and dictatorial the way certain things are running and enabling certain elements of society, and then intervening directly in what otherwise, if a Democratic president were doing it, would be protested as a distortion of the free market, et cetera, et cetera. With all the hints of fascism and dictatorship, et cetera, to specifically say this president's allowed to do it, but nobody else.
Yep.
That's weird and
creepy and frightening.
Yeah. Although I guess, one day if you win back the majority in these things, it's easy enough to pull those notes up and scratch out first and write in second. And say, all right, there we go. And you can just keep doing it. But it's a little weird. What occurs to me is that I don't know a great deal about Mattis himself. I've been more wrapped up in the controversy of how his nomination is going to be moved. But in the meantime...
Mad Dog Mattis is all I know is that Trump probably picked him because he likes his nickname.
Right. I mean, that could be it. That's good PR, by the way. That'd be something to lay on somebody. Maybe it's an ironic nickname. Wouldn't that be great? Fooled you. But I haven't seen much in the way of, or maybe I haven't paid attention enough in the way of who is he and what's he all about. But he seems awfully impressed with generals, Donald Trump does.
He's very impressed with generals. I'm hoping that his being impressed with generals and his newfound conviction that torture doesn't really work holds. Because we have a lot of torture-loving people surrounding him.
Yeah.
That are going to want to bring that one back.
I did notice the other day there's been a lot of that, and then they've been doing some polling, and asking about public opinions about torture, which is, but I guess if we're tracing the origins of normalization, by the way, the roots of this goes back to, it's enhanced interrogation, or even if it is torture, what about a ticking time bomb, or they're brown anyway, so who cares, or whatever the rationales were. I suppose this normalization bit has been underway for a long, long time. And
indeed it has.
And I guess we should not be surprised. Although I guess the polling thing did strike me as a little strange just because of the wording of the question that, X amount of the American public, they're pretty sure torture works. But P.S., we know this, of course, because the United States does not torture. But we're pretty sure that if we did, it would work because based on, so see where we are with this. Although, what it really means is we think that we have been torturing. We have been justifying not torturing by saying that the things we do are not torture, but we should keep doing them because they work, because torture works, even though that's not it. Okay, so it doesn't make any more sense than the one China policy, I don't think. But we do tend to like to fool ourselves about things that are morally repulsive, apparently. Yeah. Well, that's a little more depressing than I thought.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's the reality of things. We have to know what we're facing.
We do have to know what we're facing. We're going to have this fight again. And let this... we're seeing a lot of lessons for Democratic presidents in the future in this.
Yeah.
One, don't have Republicans as your FBI director.
Or anything, for that matter, yeah.
Two, when you take office and have a mandate and you have something as controversial as an administration who tortured behind you, don't just sweep that under the rug.
Yes, that does tend to normalize it.
Yeah. Don't just move forward optimistically. Clean house. Root that stuff out. Because it's going to come back.
Yes. I feel like I have had that conversation. But still.
Yeah. We've had that conversation, haven't we?
Yeah. But true.
I'm sorry. I'm just feeling awfully bitter today.
No,
Today's
I think
a bitter
that's fair.
day.
Yeah. It's a fair observation. It's real and it's true. And it doesn't make it any easier to be the person responsible for cleaning house. But it does suggest, perhaps, that if you agree, and you also happen to be a leading candidate for the nomination for the Democratic Party's candidate for president next time around, then I would think that would have to be. You'd have to think about whether or not you could run with that as an explicit part of your program and platform. It's not something. Although, who knows? I mean, I guess you can get away with anything and just change direction once you get into office. But I would think that you'd want to prepare the groundwork starting early. Although, I don't know whether people think that would damage their chances at winning the White House and want to hide the ball on that. I have no idea. That's a strategy question I don't want to address because I'm just not constitutionally able to say, I'll ignore torture even just as a rhetorical weapon and pick it up later. And I'll surprise everybody, but I don't know. I don't know how the field will shape up. It's too distant in the future at this point to know, but hopefully there'll be at least one candidate willing to say, if not necessarily explicitly on the torture front. I have a feeling that in 4 years we'll find ourselves with a broad array of reasons to sweep out and clean house and to look backward despite the desire to look forward. But I wonder how much of that, by the way, will be determined by the policy fights or the strategic fights that Democrats are having now as to what the focus ought to be, whether it's people fighting about identity politics or fighting about what we need to do for the white working class and who does and doesn't tolerate looking backward? I don't know. Deeper question. I wonder about that one, and I don't think I'm going to solve it anytime soon. So,
but it's something that the next Democratic candidate for president is going to have to really be thinking about hard, because there's going to be an awful lot of stuff that comes up in this new administration that's going to require rooting out when it's done to save our democracy, to save what's left of the Constitution.
Well, yeah, and we'll have to see which parts are left between now and then. Let's see, what else might have grabbed your attention? I know I set a couple of other things aside for at least just to ask you about. The impeachment vote on the IRS commissioner. I mean, that's now not news, but just felt like we had to note that. What happened there? I forgot they were doing that, and I think they forgot too.
I don't know what. Maybe Paul Ryan ended up negotiating something with the Freedom Caucus that they'll not do something. I don't know. So Jim Jordan brings his privileged resolution to the floor to bring up the impeachment vote. Democrats move to table. That doesn't work. So the agreement is when tabling it doesn't work, they will send it on to committee where nothing happens with it.
Yeah.
All of this was pre-written months and months ago.
And so
they did it and put it through, and okay. It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, there's no time anyway.
I mean, even Paul Ryan, the regular Republicans don't have any interest in impeaching this guy over something that happened before he was even in office and wasn't really a thing.
Mm-hmm.
This all goes back to, of course, the story, the hyped, ridiculous story that the IRS was targeting Tea Party groups for audits. And the IRS was actually using the shortcut of looking for keywords in people's filings to make sure, to give added scrutiny.
Mm-hmm.
Keywords were things like freedom, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And, I know they were objecting. How can you possibly have targeted the word freedom of all words? And, of course, it's because you guys use that as just a weird charm as opposed to actually letting anybody be free.
Yes.
So you just slap freedom on, freedom to torture party. Hey, freedom, though.
Freedom.
So.
Yay, freedom.
Okay. Well, yeah, so that was a pretty spectacular flame out, but I guess we all knew it was coming. It's just surprising that they even bothered asking for the time post-election. I mean, they don't really have to.
It's, when they get a hair up their butts, they just have to do something about it. Those maniacs.
So. Well, I hope they're satisfied now. I'm surprised.
I'm sure they're not. I don't know what else they're going to try to do, but
Yeah.
It's not the outcome they wanted of actually impeaching this guy for not doing something horrible.
Yeah.
They want to impeach him.
Okay.
And they're not going to care that there are actually procedures that need to be taken in order to do that. And when the Judiciary Committee doesn't actually bring it up, I'm sure they'll start raising hell again.
Yeah. Well, if they have time. Although, I suppose that
He's going to stay IRS commissioner. They'll have time.
Yeah.
They'll certainly happily bring it into the next session.
I guess that's true, and they can just do that forever. Nothing's stopping them, and as they won't have anything else busying their hands, I don't know. Although I guess they have to write the budget entirely from scratch, which is usually done anyway over in Congress. But you've probably caught wind of that one. That it's not confirmed at this point, although I can't imagine where he gets a budget from. But I guess Trump is now thinking of maybe just saying, to hell with it. Not going to submit a budget to Congress at all. Have you seen that?
That's sort of, the last budget submitted by President Obama didn't even get hearings.
Mm-hmm.
So there's precedent for just not bothering with getting the White House's take on a budget.
Yeah, they could certainly do. I mean, usually they deliver one, and then they're going to be upset they don't have the prop of the book.
It's kind of a thing.
Yeah, you stack it up on a podium and say, "This sucks."
But boy, it's an awful lot of work.
Yeah. Well, that's true, and he's not going to want to do that either.
No.
Interesting, though. I think it would be interesting to see. The speculation is that he shows up and says, "Budget." I thought the other guy was going to do that. It was his job. He should have done it. He's there till January 20th, and it has to be submitted by early February. He should have done it. He didn't? Oh, that lazy Obama. He was busy teaching you how to be president, but okay. Whatever. So he can skip that, and let's see. I also see, by the way, it's not to do with Congress, but I thought you would enjoy this one, as most people will get a good chuckle out of it and then say, "Oh my God, we're doomed." Seems that the sales folks at Trump Tower are touting their latest amenity at Trump Tower, telling prospective, I guess, condo unit buyers that they're the safest building in Manhattan, that when you buy at Trump Tower, you get Secret Service protection for your house.
Right. Free except for the federal taxes you're paying.
Right.
For the Secret Service to be there at Trump Tower, and the fact that he's charging the Secret Service rent to be at Trump Tower.
But, you say it's free except for the fact that you're paying taxes. Have you seen who lives in Trump Tower? You know the kind of people that live there. I'm not so sure. That's just free, I think. And, of course, the irony is that all of the you don't get security clearance per se, but it's interesting. If the Secret Service is sort of controlling the entrance all the time, there's going to be people that they will have to give, recognition and clearance to because they're tenants there or owners there. It's going to be a unique situation that the Secret Service has to have a list of security-approved Russian mobsters. Now, this is ordinarily the kind of person that they say, "Oh, no, that's a hard no. They can't come visit the White House, or they can't be at this fundraiser, or if you see them at an event at a rope line, you have to tackle them because they're there to murder the president." These are the friendly Russian mobsters. You got to let them in. These are the okay to go guys.
Yeah. The ones that are advising the president.
Yeah. You got to let them. The president asked for them to come in. All right. Well.
By the way.
Harder than a no.
In case you hadn't seen it.
Yes.
You're being quoted over at The Fix by Aaron Blake.
Oh, am I dumb or am I?
You're not dumb.
Oh.
He's not calling you dumb.
Dang.
So.
Well, that's...
He says it's an interesting hypothetical, in fact.
It is an interesting hypothetical. That's how you ought to take it, too. But,
And it's a better one than a recess appointment, in my opinion.
Oh.
Than Obama using that tiny window for the recess appointment.
Yeah, that one at least
for
has
one
been
thing,
tested.
it would last longer than a year if it were to happen.
That's true. And I thought as an equal opportunity schemer, I would come up with a solution for Republicans to deal with a recess appointment. Recess appointments for judges are problematic for their own reasons, and it's hard to reconcile the fact that it's a temporary appointment with the fact that the Constitution, for presumably pretty good reason, gives lifetime tenure to federal judges.
Right.
They're supposed to remain independent, and they're not supposed to have to worry about currying favor for renomination from the bench. So there's a weird tension, but they've never actually outright said that you can't do it. But these recess appointments, the actual rule on them is they last until the end of the congressional session subsequent to the session during which the appointment is made. Typically, the Congress, which lasts 2 years, the first year, this coming year, 2017, will be the first session. The 115th Congress first session. 2018 will be the 115th Congress second session. So if the appointment is made, that's interesting too. Now, is the appointment, if it's made in between the 114th and 115th Congress, during what session is the appointment made? That'll be your first challenge too.
Right.
Someone will say, oh, it was made during the second session of the 114th Congress, and the end of the session subsequent is the first session of the 115th, so you're out in a year. Others will say, well, if it was made in what ought to be considered the first session of the 115th, then it should last to the end of the second session of the 115th, 2018. So that'll be a fun fight to have.
I like yours much better.
Well, then, yeah, at least that's a real, if it works, it's a real appointment and you're just there for life.
Here's the other part. It would be a great opening bid for Joe Biden if he indeed wants to run for president in 2020.
That would be interesting.
As he has said he's looking at.
I heard him say that, and then I heard people say, oh, he was just joking, and now I can't tell.
Yeah.
But,
it's Biden. I mean, he's always thinking he could be president.
True.
So,
and I think he's the kind of guy that, you throw that out, and then maybe you throw out just joking, and then if the reaction is, oh, phew, then you say, yeah, right, just joking. Whereas if the reaction is, oh, then all right, well, now that you say it that way, maybe I will do it.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. Yeah.
I could see you. Yeah. So Joe, here you go. Let's start your presidential campaign on January 3rd.
It would be very interesting. It requires the cooperation of President Obama in renominating him, and it's not an Obama play.
No, it's not an Obama kind of thing to do.
It isn't. But he's not going to be the president for that long either, and he doesn't have to worry about that.
He really does love and care about this country.
Yeah.
So...
And, it also is a starting point for all sorts of negotiations that, I'll discuss them. I don't want to help direct them because they tend to come up with nominees that I don't like a whole lot. But there are a number of compromise places to land. The point of putting it out there really was, more than anything, to test its validity. And if it can work, then you have a caucus meeting. And you say, look, I know there's going to be some of you that have objections up front on this thing, but just like with the nuclear option, we have to hang together. And the best outcome on this is if we can convince Republicans that it will work and that it'll stick and that we're going to do it, they'll start. Well, at the very least, they may initiate it, but we could initiate it if you want. But we could talk to them about, well, if you think this will work, but it frightens the hell out of you, let's talk about doing something in December. Everybody knows Merrick Garland is the guy that should be there. Most of America probably thinks he was already confirmed. I'd be surprised to find out he's not there. And because people don't pay attention to this stuff. Believe it or not, they really don't. Or it's very easy to become confused. Just go ahead and say, you know what, we won the presidency and we retained the majority in both houses. We're pretty sure we can set policy as a gesture of magnanimity and unity. We're going to confirm this very reasonable, very moderate justice and move forward. And if you don't like it, well, then we're going to make a show of it and make you look like losers.
Yeah.
So
works for me.
Yeah. It's a place to start, certainly.
But, you've got to have Joe Manchin locked in a closet in the meantime.
Yes. Right. That's a troublesome spot. And, one of the less desirable outcomes is he successfully leverages that resistance into influence over either who the pick will be or, if not, if he can't change the pick. Because it really would be difficult at this point. One of the big selling points now of Garland is that everybody has heard his name for 100 years, and it doesn't add the additional element of surprise. an outrage if you come back with somebody completely different.
Right.
But, yeah, one of the things you might have to do to get Manchin's buy-in might be to consider, well, maybe some lower court judicial appointments for people we would not otherwise like very much, but who Joe Manchin likes a lot, or in extreme cases, if it really came down to it, Justice Manchin. This is all we can do, depending on who we think Donald Trump has in his pocket. I mean, if he's going to put some of the serious, all right, if it's Rudy Giuliani, Justice Manchin, welcome.
Yeah, I would take
Congratulations.
Justice Manchin for Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah. It had me looking at who's on the West Virginia State Supreme Court, for instance. Maybe he's good friends with some of them. And actually, there was one. At least they're an elected Supreme Court, so at least you can tell at first glance where they're coming from. There's at least one person who sounded interesting, a woman on the Supreme Court who had written a book about the greed of the coal mining companies. Like, well, okay. Oh. And if you can do that...
Manchin's not going to like her.
No, but if you can do that and get elected as a Democrat in West Virginia, you may have the pulse on the white working class after all. Thinking about... I mean, you're talking about coal jobs country, but certainly more than open to discussion about how the bosses put the screws to you all the time and risk your lives for pure profit.
Do you suppose that voting for their state justice voters really had any idea that she had done this?
No. I cannot say that with any certainty whatsoever. But the book is there. I
mean, do you know what the judges you voted for have ever written, done,
do
said?
I vote for judges? I don't even know if I have elected judges. Do I? I might have them, and I don't. So that's
the answer. Does Virginia do that? Do you vote on judges?
I don't even know. I don't even remember. So
are they on your ballot? Kagro, you vote.
This time, I don't think that they were. But yeah, I vote, and usually I go and I say, damn it, I forgot that we're supposed to vote for judges.
Yeah.
And I quick say, who are the judges from... At that point, I say, I need a party decision on this one. All I can do is say, well, I hope they didn't do anything foolish and pick someone terrible. Who is it? I don't even know. So that's how great a voter I am. So you're all excused.
I have to admit that on those I call up my lawyer friends and say,
Yeah. Well, right. That's sometimes is all you can do. You're put in all this time and attention on sometimes I even get down to the ballot questions, like local bond issues and things like that. And I hear more about those. Virginia frequently has almost always a constitutional amendment, which is as annoying as hell. Because they know usually people won't have any idea about that either, and they word them so crazily, forget about it. If you're trying to figure it out in the voting booth, what it says, those things you have to study ahead of time, for sure. Well, at any rate, I thought it was an interesting proposal to put forward and just something for people to think about. And
people are thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd that the new Republican standard, they might as well just marry the last proposal of, gee whiz, not in the last year of an outgoing administration, right, to the claim made during the campaign when they thought Hillary Clinton was going to win that, we might be able to just do that for 4 years. Right? The people who are now claiming, look at this is completely ridiculous, your standing procedure on its head, just spent the last year saying that they were going to filibuster any nominee for 4 years because the president really had no particular right to nominate people to the Supreme Court. Oh, but now procedure matters.
Now procedure matters.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. And as usual, it was the whole thing came about from having read a Republican proposal for doing something just as nutty. Anyway, I was reminded of the way this came to me was remembering their 2011. No, 2000. Yeah, I guess after the 2010 elections, the the Republican proposal to filibuster the organizing resolution so that they could get better committee ratios. And they weren't going to let anybody be assigned to committees unless they got them renegotiated. And I just, at that point, counted, well, okay, if you don't get any committee assignments, people who were already there continue on the committees. Let me count. Oh, look at that. An overwhelming Democratic advantage on every important committee. Okay, let them filibuster the organizing resolution. You know, Harry Reid, who had just been reelected, won't get a committee assignment, but, you know, I'm sure you're not worried about your committee work that much, Senator Reid. I mean, you hardly sit. I don't even know whether the majority leader sat on any.
The majority leader doesn't sit.
So, no problem for you, but, you know, your colleagues will be upset, but, okay, but you'll be winning in committees. You'll be killing it in committees, so go ahead and do it. And then they realized, oh, yeah, that's actually not to our advantage, and they dropped the idea. So I actually took a quick look at the committees this time. But what if Democrats filibuster the organizing resolution this time? But it doesn't work out quite as well. But that made me think, well, what if they filibustered the ultimate organizing resolution, swearing in the new members? I mean, essentially.
What if?
Yeah. Hey, and look at that. And it worked out. 66 of them are there. There's still a functioning body. They make a big deal out of that. And they did during early nuclear option talks. No, we continue. We're a continuing body. Okay, well, I don't think so, but if you insist, then 66 should be fine. That's a quorum. Let's go. There's no reason why we have to have the other 34 of you. I mean, eventually we will. By this afternoon, you'll all be senators. Don't worry about that. You're going to have almost full term. It's just right now I have some questions. And what if the first question is, you know, Durbin just stands to say, before we proceed with these things, I have some questions about these certificates of election. Are they the long forms? I guess you could begin with that. And, you know, Biden will say, yeah, they are. Don't worry about it. Okay, good. That's good to know that. But by the way, while I'm up here, I have some other issues I want to discuss.
Exactly. I love the idea. And I love the idea of putting this pressure on McConnell and on Senate Republicans to say, you know, this could happen.
Mm-hmm.
This could happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of trouble that they could make right back, and they will make that trouble.
Here's the other thing it does. It gets rid of the need for McConnell to go nuclear on the filibuster for Supreme Court justices, at least for the moment.
True.
It puts it off. Because I don't think that's something he's going to want to have to deal with immediately.
That is a good point. Might be doing him a favor.
We could be doing him a favor. In fact, I might be talking myself into writing this up, following up on you and writing this, unless you want to do it.
I never want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, that's difficult. That's a good idea, and it's yours, and you should claim it. It's a good point. He knows that there's going to be enormous pressure on him from his own conference and from party activists and Trump himself, and he'll have some resistance to doing it.
He's going to have a lot of resistance to, well, not a lot, but you've got Orrin Hatch, John McCain, two others, and I can't remember who now, but those two have been pretty vocal about not going nuclear any further.
Okay. Maybe.
So he does not have a united Republican conference. And, you know, these guys always talk tough and then fold, but this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and if he didn't have a vacancy to deal with for at least a couple of years, and hopefully ever, that takes the problem out of his hands. I don't know. A lot of people should be interested in seeing that vacancy filled, but then... you know, and then maybe the thing is, after you make this threat, and McConnell can say, yeah, let's de-escalate things a little bit here. There's, you know what, we know this nominee, we know him pretty well. We got some time in December. Let's close things out on a high note and start with a clean slate in January.
Yeah.
I have no problem with confirming him by regular order, except that I would like to be able to say, see, I told you it would work. But
Yeah.
don't mind me.
The
I'll
only
be
thing
okay.
is we've got just probably this week.
Yeah.
I think they're going to do the continuing resolution and then they're going to bust town. I mean, maybe we can convince Biden, Reid, Schumer, and McConnell of this by the end of the day tomorrow. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean the big difference, between this and the original filibuster rules change was it took 5 years of you had to convince the newspapers that this was a real thing, and we do start out in the same position. People,
Here you've convinced Aaron Blake at the
Well, there you
Washington
go.
Post, which is much more important than convincing Crystal Liza at the Washington Post.
Oh,
If you're going to
yeah.
be in the fix, you don't want to be in the fix in a Liza Post.
Yeah. So that's true. Well, okay, we got a break there. I understand I guess everybody's having fun over at the Federalist, saying that it's the dumbest thing ever, which is probably a good start. Also, I mean,
Yes.
honestly, the Federalist
And
should
good
be
for
ignoring
you.
this. If it wasn't, I guess if it didn't worry you, you would just be like, psh,
You'd ignore
who
it.
cares? But I've had fun, making fun of things I should be ignoring too. So I suppose they might be convinced of its foolishness, but since that doesn't matter to me, it's not a matter of I don't need to convince conservative activists that it can work. I need to convince conservative senators that it
Right.
can work, and they won't listen to me about that. They'll be listening to their Democratic colleagues who will say
Right.
it can work. That's the key thing. But with filibuster reform, it took a long time to get newspapers to say this is a real thing. The first couple of years of it was just like this, people writing articles eviscerating the proposal. Right. It's a fever dream. Well, it's a pretty quick 5-year fever dream. It's done now. So, all right. Well, it's a fun thing to play with. I love your thought on it. I hope you will share that with everybody in written form as well. And thank you for helping us limp through another post-election show here.
You're most
Been
welcome.
tough. Okay, I appreciate your coming by.
I don't think I saved anybody's day, but hey.
Mine, anyway. I'm getting dizzy. It's time for me to get off the air. Thanks so much. And
You're most
we'll
welcome.
speak
Talk to you
again.
next week.
Okay, thanks for cheering me up with that fix bit, too.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. Take care, Joan. Joan McCarter, senior political writer at the Daily Kos, has saved us all, as predicted. Thanks again, Joan. It's time for me to get my oxygen levels back up. Talking for 2 hours is a tough thing to do. And hand the microphones back to the Netroots Radio guys over at the After Show, who will pay more attention to all the stories that Greg probably had lined up for me to talk about, but that I buried under my usual musings. What do they got? Well, let's read the description here, saying he was beaten like a slave. Wow. A black retired police officer describes being brutalized by white cops during a bogus arrest. Man, if you can't see what's going on, I don't think you're ever going to wake up to this stuff. Minnesota's non-discrimination protections are the latest target of the anti-LGBT law firm Alliance Defending Freedom. See, there's that freedom token again. And a study published in the online journal Social Science and Medicine found that 68% of U.S. citizens of Latin descent have been discriminated against. Probably no surprise there in that one either. For the last half, they'll be reporting that the New York Times public editor appeared on Fox and blasted her reporters for their accurate tweets about Trump. Wow. That and a little bit more I'll tell you about after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yes, there is more to the last half. I'm sensing a theme because the last story listed here, black employees sue CNN over abuse of power, revenge, retaliation, and discrimination. Man, you can't get away with just working for a living at CNN or Fox these days. Stay tuned for all of that and more next.